All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive today into, oh man, one of the most infamous haunted house stories ever, the Amityville Horror.
Ooh, spooky.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at using excerpts from the book Amityville, the DeFeo murders, and the Lutz haunting
Okay.
to try to kind of unpack what happened. So
Yeah.
think like quiet suburban Long Island in the 1970s,
Okay.
a seemingly perfect family, and this beautiful Dutch colonial house at 112 Ocean Avenue.
112 Ocean Avenue.
But just like any good horror story, things are definitely not what they seem.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a story that really unfolds in two distinct parts, like almost like a play, right?
Yeah.
First, you have the brutal murders of the DeFeo family, and then a year later,
Right.
the Lutz family moves in and claims to experience a full-blown haunting.
Oh, wow.
So we'll be looking at both of these events through the lens of the book
Okay.
and trying to see what we can learn from the source material.
So let's start with the DeFeo family. The source material kind of paints this picture of a family that from the outside seems to have it all, but the cracks start to show when you look closer.
Yeah. The book really details this huge contrast between the DeFeo's public image and their private life.
Okay.
So Ronald DeFeo Jr., the father, ran a successful car dealership. They lived in this beautiful, spacious home.
Yeah.
They were well respected in the community, but behind closed doors, there was a lot of tension.
Yeah, the source describes Ronald Sr. as like this really strict and controlling figure.
Right.
What kind of impact did that have on like the whole family dynamic, do you think?
Well, you can imagine the pressure that it created.
Right.
This need to always maintain the perfect facade.
Yeah.
And he was particularly hard on his eldest son, Ronald Jr., who they called Butch.
Right.
And their relationship was volatile.
Yeah, the book talks about Butch having anger issues, and how his father would often resort to physical discipline.
Right.
So it sounds like a pretty volatile mix.
Yeah.
Were there other children in the family?
Yes. Butch had 4 younger siblings.
Oh, wow.
Don, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew.
Okay.
And so they were all living in this pressure cooker environment, trying to
Right.
navigate their father's strict rules and maintain the family's, carefully crafted image of success and respectability.
And then comes that horrific night, November 13th, 1974.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The book lays out this chilling sequence of events.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's straight out of a nightmare.
It is. It's, you're right about that.
Yeah.
All 6 members of the DeFeo family, Ronald Sr., Louise, Butch, Don, Allison, and Mark,
Wow.
were found shot to death in their beds.
Oh, my gosh.
And the police reports detail how they were all found in their bedrooms, shot with a .35 caliber rifle.
Jeez.
And what's particularly disturbing is just the lack of any signs of struggle.
Right.
It almost seems like they were killed in their sleep.
The source mentions that the murders were committed silently. Like, none of the neighbors reported hearing any gunshots.
Yeah.
Which just adds another layer of creepiness to the whole thing.
A powerful rifle like that,
Yeah.
and yet complete silence.
Right.
It's unsettling, to say the least.
Yeah.
And then you have Butch's really strange behavior after the murders.
Yeah.
He goes to work like nothing happened, even stops at a bar,
Oh, wow.
but then frantically tells his friends that his family has been shot.
So was he trying to, like, create an alibi, or was he genuinely in shock?
Right.
Did the police suspect him right away?
Well, the book details how the police found evidence at the scene that pointed directly at Butch.
Okay.
The murder weapon, that .35 caliber rifle, was found in the house, and they found Butch's fingerprints on it.
Oh, wow.
And his story kept changing. First, he claimed that he was out all night. Then he started talking about these inner voices that told him to kill his family.
So that's where the insanity defense comes in, right?
Right.
The source mentions that there were some conflicting psychiatric opinions about, like, Butch's mental state.
Yeah.
Did any of the experts definitively say that he was legally insane at the time of the murders?
That's a great question, and it's a very complex issue.
Yeah.
Some experts thought he might have had antisocial personality disorder, maybe exacerbated by drug use.
Okay.
But there wasn't clear evidence of schizophrenia or any condition that would completely explain those voices he claimed to hear.
Right.
So.
And the verdict? What happened to Butch?
Well, despite the conflicting opinions about his mental state, Butch DeFeo was found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder.
Wow.
He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences.
Jeez.
And remained in prison until he died in 2021.
Wow.
But the book makes it clear that even with a conviction,
Right.
the why behind this horrific act is still very much shrouded in mystery.
Yeah.
There's a lot we still don't know about what happened in that house.
Absolutely.
And why he did what he did.
It's a tough one to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
For sure. It's hard to even imagine the horror of what happened to the DeFeo family.
Yeah, for sure.
But the story doesn't end there.
No.
Just over a year after those brutal murders,
Right.
a new family moves into a 112 Ocean Avenue.
Yeah.
The Lutz family.
The Lutz family.
It seems, kind of unbelievable. Like, who would knowingly move into a house with such a dark past?
Right. You would think that the history alone
Yeah.
would be enough to deter anyone.
Right.
But the source material introduces us to George and Kathleen Lutz and her 3 children from a previous marriage.
Sure.
And they, for various reasons, decide to take the plunge, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
They were looking for a bigger house. This one, despite its reputation, was a real bargain.
Wow.
So they,
The book kind of hints that they were aware of the murders,
Yeah.
but maybe didn't fully grasp, like, the magnitude of what had happened there.
Right.
Or maybe they just thought they could, like, create a fresh start, like a new chapter for the house.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
The book describes, their initial few weeks in the house, and they went about their daily routines, unpacking, exploring the rooms, getting to know the neighbors. They seemed determined to create a sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
But even from the beginning, there's this creeping sense of unease.
Right.
Of something being off.
Yeah, the source talks about Kathleen experiencing this, like, unexplained coldness in certain parts of the house. This constant feeling of being watched.
Right.
And, like, these strange, persistent odors. So do you think these were, like, early signs of a haunting? Or could it have been just, like, a result of their own anxieties about the house's history?
That's a really interesting question, right? Could their knowledge of the murders have, like, created this self-fulfilling prophecy where their fears manifested as these, like, unsettling sensations?
Right.
That's certainly possible.
Yeah.
But then, as the events described in the book start to escalate,
Right.
It becomes a little harder to explain them away as just being psychological.
Right.
So
the book chronicles this whole range of increasingly disturbing paranormal activity that the Lutz family claimed to experience. It started with, like, subtle things, like noises, objects moving.
Right.
But then progressed to, like, much more frightening events.
Yeah.
What were some of the specific examples that were mentioned in the source material?
Well, they mentioned hearing clicks and whispers, phantom footsteps, especially coming from the basement, and then objects would move on their own.
Oh, wow.
Doors slamming shut, toys being thrown across rooms.
Oh, my God.
And then it progressed to even actual physical contact.
What?
So Kathleen described being pushed and pulled by these unseen forces, even feeling a hand on her shoulder when no one was there.
That's so scary.
Yeah.
Did it indicate how these experiences, like, affected the family psychologically?
Yeah.
Living in that kind of environment, I can only imagine, must have been incredibly stressful.
Yeah, it was incredibly traumatic for all of them.
Yeah.
The source describes, the toll it took on each family member. George, for instance, he started having nightmares, insomnia.
Oh, wow.
He became increasingly irritable, withdrawn.
Right.
He even developed these obsessive behaviors, like constantly checking locks.
Oh, jeez.
Performing these rituals, almost as if he was trying to ward off evil.
Wow. And Kathleen, how did she deal with all this?
The source really paints this heartbreaking picture of Kathleen's descent into fear and paranoia.
Wow.
She was constantly anxious, on edge, plagued by these disturbing dreams and hallucinations.
Oh, gosh.
She describes feeling a presence in the house, something dark and malevolent.
And what about the children? They must have been terrified.
The book talks about how they started having night terrors, and clinging to their parents.
Oh, wow.
Their behavior changed.
Right.
And their schoolwork suffered.
Oh, no.
They were living in this constant state of fear.
Right.
Never knowing what might happen next.
So how long did they actually endure this, like, nightmare?
They only lasted 28 days.
Wow.
Imagine that less than a month in this house, and it was so terrifying
Jeez.
that they felt they had no choice but to flee.
Right.
They left in the middle of the night, abandoning most of their belongings.
Oh my gosh.
The book really emphasizes the abruptness of their departure and the lasting trauma that they carried with them.
Okay, so we've got these two intertwined stories, right?
Yeah.
The brutal DeFeo murders, and then the Lutz family's claims of a haunting.
Right.
Both rooted in this one house at 112 Ocean Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
What are we supposed to make of all this?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Separating fact from speculation, trying to understand what really happened in those walls.
Right.
We have this concrete evidence of this horrific crime.
Yeah.
A family wiped out.
Right.
A young man convicted.
Right.
But the paranormal element, the haunting, that's where things get really murky.
Yeah, the source material lays out all these details.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really offer any, definitive answers.
Right.
It's like the book itself is like this haunted house.
Yeah.
Full of shadowy corners and, unsettling whispers.
I like that. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. The book really encourages you to examine the evidence.
Yeah.
And draw your own conclusions.
Right.
And that's kind of what makes this whole story so fascinating, so enduring,
Right.
Sparks debate.
Yeah.
Is this genuine paranormal activity, or is it the power of suggestion?
Right.
A family caught in this spiral of fear and anxiety, amplified by this house's tragic history.
Okay, so let's go back to Butch DeFeo for a second.
Okay.
The book presents those conflicting psychiatric opinions, right?
Yeah.
About his mental state.
Yeah.
Some suggesting antisocial personality disorder, others hinting at something more.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think those inner voices he claimed to hear were real?
That's the question that's haunted, investigators and armchair detectives for decades.
Right.
Was it a genuine mental breakdown, a descent into madness?
Right.
Or was it a calculated attempt to escape responsibility for this really heinous crime?
Right.
And the source material doesn't give us a clear answer,
right?
But it provides enough detail to really fuel, endless speculation.
Yeah.
And then you have the Lutz family's experiences, right?
Yeah.
The book details all these really unsettling events, the noises, the moving objects, the physical contact.
Yeah.
It's really hard to just dismiss it all as simply their imaginations running wild.
Yeah, especially given the intensity and the variety of those experiences. Yeah. It wasn't just one or two isolated incidents.
Right. It was constant, this bombardment of these disturbing phenomena almost from the moment they moved in.
Right.
And it wasn't just Kathleen.
Right.
It was George. It was the children.
Right.
Each of them experienced something unsettling, something that really shook them to their core.
It makes you wonder, if it wasn't like a traditional haunting, what else could it have been?
Right.
Could a place somehow retain a memory of traumatic events?
Yeah.
Like some sort of psychic residue that affects those who enter?
The source material touches upon this idea
that
places, objects, even people can kind of carry the energy of past events, whether you call it a haunting, a psychic imprint, or something else entirely.
Right.
There's this really intriguing possibility that trauma can leave this mark, this echo that kind of resonates through time.
And maybe that's the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive, right?
Yeah, I think so.
The Amityville Horror isn't just a scary story. Right. It's a story about the power of belief, the weight of history, and these enduring mysteries of the human mind.
Absolutely.
It challenges us to consider what we believe is possible and really to grapple with the unknown.
The book doesn't give us all the answers.
Right.
And maybe that's the point, It leaves us with more questions than answers.
Right.
And that's what makes it so compelling.
Yeah.
It encourages us to think critically.
Right.
To weigh the evidence, to really draw our own conclusions.
And on that note, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Inspired by the source material. If the walls of 112 Ocean Avenue could talk, what stories would they tell?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
What secrets would they reveal?
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of the Amityville Horror.